Hours after the quake, the tsunami wave continues to spread across the ocean. Countries all around the Pacific Rim watch nervously. In Hawaii, the Tsunami Warning Center is on full alert.
Very quickly, we realized that this was basically the first big ocean-crossing tsunami that had happened in 40 years.
Will the tsunami hit Hawaii? If so, when? And how big will it be? Readings from deep ocean sensors suggest the wave is up to 3 feet high.
Now that is monstrous on the deep ocean for a tsunami to be that big. And at that point, we went to a Pacific-wide warning, which means another message, and now lots and lots of phone calls.
State warning point. This is the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center.
Hawaii issues an evacuation alert. People head for higher ground. The wave hits Hawaii. As predicted, it's 3 feet high. For more than an hour, it surges over the islands.
Whoa! Gosh, that is big. That is absolutely massive. Just lost my shoes. This is coming straight over the wall onto the main road. That is absolutely unbelievable. Here it comes again. Pouring over the wall. You can see a car making a run for it out there. I am completely stranded now between the wall and the road.
There is tens of millions of dollars in damage. The wave pulls cars and houses out to sea. Hawaii's early warning system gives people time to get away from the coast. Here, unlike Japan, no one loses their life.
So the warning system works incredibly well. But obviously, if the event happens literally on your back doorstep, then no warning system that could ever be conceived could be quick enough.
Tsunamis are simply unstoppable, but they can be tracked. The Hawaii Warning Team monitors the Japan tsunami across the Pacific.
We couldn't let our guard down because, of course, the tsunami has continued on, and we have a continuing responsibility to the rest of the Pacific.
The scientists effectively warn the world.
As the tsunami spread across the ocean, at location after location, we realized, oh, our predictions are pretty darn good.
Japan's tsunami surges toward the U.S., its power diminishing with every passing mile.
There's a very intensive wave, but as it spreads out, that energy is being distributed along a bigger and bigger circumference.
10 hours later and over 5,000 miles from the quake, the tsunami, now smaller and weaker, finally hits California. The wave still creates havoc along the coast.
There, certain parts of the coast focused the wave. So although it was only 1 meter in Hawaii, it actually became 2 meters in places like Crescent City in California. And again, because people were warned, there was very little destruction or damage, certainly to human life. One person did lose their life in California, north of Crescent Bay, because they rushed down to the beach to take photos of the tsunami as it came in.
Back in Japan, the crisis continues to escalate. Different locations suffer different effects. Veteran journalist Callum McRae sets off along the coast to discover how far-reaching the tsunami's damage is. This is the isolated mountain community of Kahoku.
We're up in the mountains, 8 kilometers from the coast. And what's happened here is that the tsunami has created a huge surge which has climbed all the way up the river and then flooded here.
The result is stunning. A new saltwater lake among mountains, miles from the sea.
ね、この裏にね、川があるんですよ、排水堀ってね。それで、通常はね、ほとんど水がないくらいなんですよ。通常は。ところが、津波後ね、1波目は来なかったけど、2波目あたりからやっぱり登り始めて、ね、
夜のうちに登ったんだね。
そして夜のうちに登ってきてね、知らないてるうちにもうここに水乗っていたわけですよ。次の日からね。それからずっと引かないでそのままなってんだね。もう私たちも先代からここに住んでいないともうないの。私だけでも70年なんだけど、こういうこと初めて。70年以上なんだけどね。初めてだね。
The locals here fear the receding waters will expose bodies swept up from the coast. Traveling north, McRae reaches Ofanato. At first, the town seems untouched.
Look over there. Those houses look undamaged. They've got power and everything here. That's just so strange.
Closer to shore, it is a different story.
And as if Ofanato didn't have enough problems, scientists reckon that this whole area, this region, has subsided well over a metre. And in the next couple of days, the region's also expecting the highest tides of the year. The sea is some 500 metres down there, and yet up here we have this. It's a remarkable sight by any standards, a huge tug which has been brought all the way up here by the tsunami. And what's remarkable about it, or what's even more remarkable about it, is that what it says about the size of the tsunami. Because the Japan Meteorological Center have just produced provisional estimates saying that the tsunami that hit this region was about 3.5 metres high. Now we're 7-8 metres above sea level here, and even given the surge, the fact that it could bring that all the way up here does suggest that the tsunami here was a lot higher than 3.5 metres.
Boats, trucks, and cars are dumped on top of buildings, much higher than the recorded height of the wave.
That happens because as the water's pushing through restricted areas like the streets of towns and villages, it's being effectively funneled. And the water's got to go somewhere, and so it goes up as it's squeezed and funneled and pushes material, pushes cars onto roofs, sometimes as high as 50 feet. So in areas, the impact of this will be even greater, particularly where you get narrow streets.
Once the wave starts to pick up part of a town, the warehouses along the dock, the debris and all that, then it becomes more like a glacier. You know, it's a moving wall of debris. And the more mass it has, the more power it has as it comes in. It doesn't really look like water beyond some point. It looks like the entire town is flowing in, and it is. So all the mass of all the buildings, cars, refrigerators, and everything that's in that wall, it's essentially a debris glacier at that point, and it just keeps coming in.
This is Minami Sanriku, a town that has been virtually wiped off the map. 95% of the buildings destroyed. Over 10,000 people, half the population, missing.
This place symbolizes the tragedy more than anywhere. an entire town wiped out by the force of nature.
It's almost difficult to imagine one's thoughts as one sees this coming towards you. And as it hits the coast, it's then picking up all the debris, it's picking up buildings, cars and things, and you then end up with this sort of really quite horrific mass moving through towns, villages, across fields, causing complete destruction.
I mean, it would be bad enough if it was only water, but because it's full of cars and you can't swim against it or flow with it or do anything, you're just like in front of a bulldozer of moving the entire town.
It's funny that when you hear that sound of an ambulance, it kind of actually gives you hope that they might have found somebody alive. Although that must be happening fewer and fewer times between. Anyone who did survive and was trapped would almost certainly have died of hypothermia by now.
At the town of Rikuzen Takata, 25 miles up the coast, rescue workers hunt for survivors and discover the dead.
When they find a body, they put a large stick in the ground with a flag attached to it so that it can be recovered later. It's a fairly gruesome and sad task. In fact, they're not just collecting bodies, they're also collecting personal mementos as well, which they find, like this. I'm afraid what we have here is more bodies waiting to be taken away.
Within days, scientists gather more data from Japan's earthquake and tsunami than from any other disaster in history. Over Tokyo, Professor Roger Billam returns from his aerial survey. The city's vulnerability is clear.
There are 30 million people within about 2 meters of sea level, and a tsunami here, of course, would be absolutely devastating.
Suddenly, there is a problem.
We had a big earthquake just now, so...
Really?
Yeah.
We've just learned from the ground that there was an earthquake that damaged the heliport. They're checking for damage right now. We don't know how big the earthquake was, but it was obviously a very nearby aftershock.
A massive aftershock hits Tokyo, magnitude 6.2. In the week that follows the main quake, there are over 500 aftershocks. This is the actual data from seismometers around Japan. The larger the circle, the bigger the aftershock.
The shaking is now stopped, so I'll just continue landing.
Finally, Billam's helicopter receives the all-clear to land. The helipad is damaged.
I've noticed that the tarmac here, which should be beautifully dark everywhere, in fact stained white in places, and you can see that in fact sand has come out of this crack, and there's another one over there, another one over there. We're very close to the shoreline, and the lurching motion of the ground during the earthquake has caused the subsurface liquefied sands to come belching out on the top.
Here there is evidence of liquefaction, the strange phenomenon filmed earlier.
And over here is an old mud volcano. How old? It's about 3 days old. You can see how the mud came pouring out of the top there. So look, we're 200 miles from the epicenter here, and here's a crack in the heliport landing area. it continues all the way along here. You can actually see down about 3 feet in places. Splits into two here. This goes over here. You can see an offset in the in this trim around the tarmac.
As the Earth's crust shatters during the main quake, new stresses spread along the fault. Relieve the pressure in one place, and it builds up somewhere else, triggering aftershocks.
What you're seeing here is how those aftershocks happened over a period of about a week after the main shock. And that orange region, delineated by those orange dots, essentially gives you a feeling for the area of the fault along the plate boundary that ruptured in this event.
Every aftershock takes its toll on an already frightened population. And every aftershock potentially triggers another one.
That main shock was followed by hundreds of magnitude 5s and dozens of magnitude 6 earthquakes and a handful of magnitude 7s. Once you had a pattern of an earthquake happening, followed by a bigger one, you never know whether it's going to happen again.
Unrelenting tremors are just one of the new realities facing the Japanese people. Hundreds of thousands are homeless. In the regional capital of Sendai, the temporary shelters are full. But in this darkened, ravaged city, people do their best.
We're in Sendai, 300 or 400 meters from the shorefront in a scene of apocalyptic chaos. It's cold, it's dark, there's no power anywhere. And yet, up there in that abandoned block of flats, on the top floor, there's one light. One man, one family perhaps, trying to survive in this chaos.
The following day, on the main road back to Tokyo, the artery that connects north and south is empty. A reminder that this country has ground to a halt.
This is already one of the worst nuclear accidents in history if it stops right now. And we're dealing with multiple meltdown possibilities.
2 radioactive substances, cesium and iodine, were detected near the #1 reactor at the plant on Saturday.
The Fukushima nuclear base is about 60 kilometers that way. That's about 38 miles or so, I think. You know, we've got the windows closed. We're driving fast. Who knows whether it's safe? The advice is very conflicting. The American government says that has put an exclusion zone of 80 kilometers. And of course, we're well within that. On the other hand, the Japanese government say it's fine as long as we're more than 30 kilometers away. So, I mean, who can tell? Nobody knows. But we'll keep the windows closed and I'll put on a mask. Mask. Looks good, huh?
At Fukushima power plant, the nuclear crisis worsens. The emergency batteries are dead. There is no power to cool the reactors. Temperatures quickly rise. Water levels drop. Pressure builds. The incredible heat of the fuel rods generates hydrogen gas. The hydrogen explodes. Desperate plant workers inject seawater into the reactors in an effort to cool them.
Essentially, those plant operators at the time said, we're going to commit plant suicide. We're going to go ahead and kill these plants, knowing that they'll never work again. But that was a better option than not letting the cooling system fail and risking even a worse outcome.
There's been another blast at a stricken Japanese nuclear power plant, the second hydrogen explosion in 3 days.
the Japanese military use helicopters to scoop up seawater to dump on the reactors. It doesn't work. The long-term consequence of what is happening at Fukushima remains unknown. The humanitarian disaster continues. Estimates put the death toll from the quake and tsunami at over 20,000. For scientists, the analysis goes on. From all the data they have acquired, one threat is still very real. For years, experts have warned of a large quake and tsunami off the coast near Tokyo. Japan's recent disaster happens 260 miles north. But now, the fault lines below Tokyo are even more stressed.
What's been expected is a slip of the Philippine plate relative to the Eurasian plate. And what has actually occurred is slip of the Pacific plate relative to the Eurasian plate. Sometimes a great earthquake will cause the next patch of the plate boundary to slip. So all eyes are on what's happening, how this earthquake has stressed the neighboring part of the plate boundary. You've got to understand this whole region is in a very high state of stress and it's ready to go. And they've been expected to go any minute. So this recent earthquake is going to have brought that closer. The question is how much closer?
When an earthquake like this happens, it basically, all of the stress that it relieves in the Earth's crust essentially gets transferred somewhere else. It doesn't go away. It actually adds loading to other parts of the crust.
The densest areas of population survive largely unscathed. Next time could be different.
One area of extreme concern is Tokyo, the world's largest city. There could be a major event in Tokyo that would be extremely damaging to this very densely populated region.
If you were going to choose somewhere to put one of the major industrial economies on the planet, that part of the Pacific Rim is not the place you would choose.
It could be happening as we speak, or it might not happen for a decade.
The critical thing is, has this particular earthquake shaken that region up so that it brings forward the timing of that earthquake?
It's foolish to think that we can stop natural phenomena. What we've got to do is to learn to live with them and minimize the consequences when they happen and minimize also the recovery time.
It's very difficult for science to protect against earthquakes and tsunamis. What science can do is help town planners, engineers to make buildings stronger, to make designs of buildings and cities more resilient. We cannot stop these things happening. We can't prevent it. We can prepare for it.
Scientists believe Japan's tsunami holds valuable lessons for the U.S.
One of the interesting things about this earthquake is that it's really a template for what might occur on the northern coast of Oregon and Washington. We know we are expecting an almost identical sized earthquake.
Stretching from Vancouver Island to Northern California is Cascadia, a vast and volatile fault line. Here, like Japan, one plate is driving beneath another, squeezing and compressing it. Tremendous pressure builds. Cascadia could rupture in a huge magnitude 9 quake. A megaquake off the Pacific Northwest coast would create a tsunami similar to Japan's. Roger Billam scans the coast of Japan for clues. He hopes to understand what could happen to America's west coast.
Like this coastline is long and flat. Parts of the Oregon coast are mountainous, that's not going to be a problem, but where we have a flat-lying land near the shore, we've got to expect a similar effect.
It's a little bit like airplane crashes. The people go in and try to figure out what happened and learn from that. And unfortunately, we learn from these disasters, but it makes people stronger for the next one.
The world has seen what happened in Japan. The question is, are we prepared?
We compare it to Japan, where the preparation level is higher than what we have in the U.S. And we see that the Japanese had still quite a ways yet to go. It's a little sobering. Think about how many decades of work we have in front of us just to get to where the Japanese were, and then we have to get probably beyond that as well.